Hi, my name's Kala. When I bought that old, half-broken house on the edge of Houston, my mother laughed. "Pathetic loser," she said. My brother called it a dump fit for a ghost. They thought I'd finally fallen beneath the family name. But the thing is, they were right about one thing. There was something hiding in those walls. Not ghosts. Not exactly. Just the truth they'd spent decades burying. A map, a name, and the man who'd been waiting all these years to hand me everything they stole. Before we dive in, tell me, what time are you listening to this, and where are you right now? Because by the time I finished uncovering what they did, the house wasn't the only thing collapsing. The car made a gentle rattle as I slowed at the corner, its aging engine humming beneath me like a tired sigh. Every driveway on this block gleamed with some luxury model, sleek, polished, proud. Mine, a weather-worn Civic with mismatched paint near the bumper, stuck out like a sore thumb. I parked a few houses down. Maybe no one would notice, or maybe they'd notice more. Either way, I wasn't parking in front of their house. Not tonight. The sun had barely set, but Houston's early autumn left the air warm and thick. I reached for the compact mirror, swiped my lipstick across lips already dry from anxiety, and stared at myself. 37, divorced, single, still freelancing in a career people barely respected, and tonight, I was the family spectacle. Again. "You promised yourself," I muttered. "You're not here to prove anything. Just smile, breathe, get through it." When I stepped through the gate, the sound of laughter spilled from the open dining room windows. Not joyful laughter, the kind that echoes around fine wine and inflated egos. Lucan's voice was unmistakable, deep and smug. Then Nora's, light and insincere, like the clink of a cheap charm bracelet trying to sound expensive. The house was immaculate. Of course it was. It had always been. Nothing in Marjorie Thorne's life was allowed to crack or chip, not china, not furniture, and certainly not appearances. The butler opened the door before I knocked. He didn't smile, just nodded. Inside, the air smelled like lemon polish and designer perfume. The same mixture I remembered from high school debates and dinner parties, where I was too quiet, too awkward, too much of a disappointment. I walked toward the dining room. My heels clicked once, twice, and then silence. Marjorie's voice met me first. "Oh, Kala, you didn't need to dress up. It's not a job interview." I paused. My dress, simple navy cotton, felt suddenly loud under the chandelier light. I looked at her, pristine as always, her white blouse crisp, pearls at her throat like armor. "Good to see you too, Mom," I said, forcing my lips into what I hoped passed for a smile. They had already started eating, of course. The table was long and formal, set with gold-trimmed dishes and folded linen napkins that probably hadn't been touched in years. I slid into the only available seat at the far end. Nora sipped her wine with a tilt of her head. "Still doing that interior design thing?" "Freelancing," I replied. "Mostly residential projects, a few office spaces." Lucan leaned back, that performative stretch he did when he was gearing up to say something performatively casual. "I heard you bought a house, somewhere off Fulton?" I nodded. "Yeah, needs some work, but it's got good bones." "Brave," he said, his smirk so familiar it made my skin itch. "Or desperate." I kept my tone light. "It's mine. That's enough for now." Marjorie reached for her wine. "Some people collect houses, some collect mistakes." She sipped, and then laughed. A sharp, practiced sound, the kind of laugh that ends sentences and starts echoes. Lucan chuckled. Nora smiled behind her glass. I sat still, my face frozen into polite interest. "At least," I said, voice even, "mistakes can be rebuilt." The clinking of silverware stopped. Just for a second. Elliot, my father, sat at the head of the table, swirling his wine. He didn't look up. He never did anymore. Dinner resumed with a brittle energy. Lucan bragged about his new contract downtown. Nora compared country club fees. I pushed food around my plate, unsure if I was hungrier or lonelier. Then a server passed behind me, and a glass of wine tipped, just slightly. A red splash landed near my plate, close but not quite on my lap. Marjorie didn't miss a beat. See, even the universe agrees. No one laughed this time, but no one said anything either. I looked around the table. My sister avoided eye contact. Lucan checked his phone. My father's gaze was deep in his plate. I folded my napkin. My hands were steady. "Thanks for dinner," I said. "I'll head back to my mistake now." My chair scraped back. I stood. No one moved. No one protested. Marjorie's fork paused midair. "Always so dramatic." That's what she always said, whenever I dared to walk away. Outside, the night air had turned heavier. My car sat alone under a flickering streetlight. I unlocked it, tossed my purse into the passenger seat, and paused. Digging into the side pocket, I found it. The key. Slightly bent, cheap brass. The one my mother had shoved into an envelope and dropped in my mailbox 2 days after I signed the deed. No note, just the key. I held it under the streetlight, twisting it between my fingers. A part of me wanted to throw it into the storm drain. Instead, I whispered, "At least this key still opens something." That night, when I first opened the door to my mistake, the air felt colder than it should have. It wasn't just the lack of insulation or the creak of wood adjusting to the season. It was something else, like the house had taken a breath the moment I stepped inside. I didn't stay up long. Just enough to sweep a path from the front door to the small bedroom where a thin mattress waited between boxes and folded sheets that still smelled faintly of detergent. The corners of the room had collected dust, like memories no one wanted to revisit. I didn't even change, just lay down in my clothes and let the silence swallow me whole. By morning, sunlight slipped between the broken blinds, cutting stripes across the walls. Dust danced in the beams, catching on old smoke stains near the ceiling. Somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower buzzed faintly, and a bird tapped twice against the window before flying off. I sat up slowly. My back ached. My mouth was dry, but I was still here, still standing. "They didn't break me," I said out loud, the words barely more than a whisper. "Not yet." I swung my legs over the side of the bed, planted my feet on the cool wood floor, and breathed in. The smell of the house was sharper this morning, aged paper, dry wood, something faintly metallic. I reached over and flipped on the radio sitting on top of a box. It crackled, caught the tail end of a country song, then fizzled into static. No matter how I adjusted the dial, the signal wouldn't stick. I left it on anyway. Somehow, the noise felt better than nothing. I moved through the hallway slowly, taking in each detail. Faded wallpaper curled at the edges, like it was trying to peel away from its own past. An old mug sat on the windowsill, its handle chipped, the ceramic stained. There was a photo frame tucked behind it, the glass missing, but the cardboard back still clung to the wall like it was afraid to let go. In the kitchen, I started cleaning, scraping paint, sweeping corners, wiping surfaces that hadn't been touched in years. Every movement felt like peeling back layers, not just of the house, but of myself. "This house and I muttered, brushing hair from my face. "We're both fixer-uppers." The words made me pause. Then I heard it. A faint, papery sound, like something shifting inside the wall. I froze. Listened again. Nothing. Maybe the wind, or a mouse, or just my imagination. I went back to scraping paint near the baseboard, but then it came again, soft, like someone slowly sliding a page across a wooden desk. I glanced toward the old vent by the floor, but it was sealed shut. No draft, no open windows. Still. The air moved, just enough to lift the corner of the newspaper I had laid down earlier. I knelt beside it, placing my hand near the vent. Cold. A chill ran up my arms, but I didn't pull back. Instead, I followed the feeling, moving across the room to the far corner where an old cabinet leaned against. The wall. I hadn't bothered with it yet. It looked too heavy to move on my own. But something told me I had to try. I braced my legs, shoved my shoulder against the side, and pushed. Dust billowed out, filling my throat. The cabinet groaned, then inched away from the wall. I coughed, wiped my eyes, and looked behind it. There, half stuck to the wall with brittle tape, was a yellowed envelope. I reached for it. The paper felt thick, the edges curled. It was sealed with dark red wax, cracked in one corner. No name, no stamp, just waiting. My fingers hesitated before breaking the seal. Inside was a single folded sheet. I carefully unfolded it, revealing a hand-drawn map. The ink had faded in places, but the lines were clear. Roads, a few rivers, maybe some wooded areas. My eyes scanned for landmarks, trying to place it. Then I saw it, just north of Houston, a small circle drawn in the margin. Next to it, one word, scrawled in cursive, home. I sat on the floor, staring. Home. I didn't move for a long time. A car passed by outside. A dog barked. Somewhere in the house, a board creaked like it was tired of holding up secrets. My phone buzzed. I reached for it, still holding the map in one hand. Voicemail. The name made my stomach knot. Marjorie Thorne. I pressed play, already knowing what she'd say. Calla, you made a fool of yourself last night. Honestly, I don't know what you think you're proving with all this. Don't contact us again until you've grown up. The message ended. I didn't flinch, didn't replay it, just deleted it. Then I laid the map flat on the dusty floor, smoothing out the creases with both hands. If this was another mistake, it was mine to make. And this time, I wouldn't apologize for following my gut. I traced the word home with my fingertip. It felt warmer than the paper around it, like it had waited through years and dust and silence, just for me. The map didn't come with instructions, no date, no signature. But whoever left it, someone wanted me to find it. Someone knew I'd end up in this house. And maybe that someone knew what I needed before I did. I stood up, heart heavier than before, but steadier too. The sun shifted again, casting a narrow beam across the floor. It landed right on that single word. Home. By morning, I had packed a bag. Whatever waited at that marked place, I was going to find it. I didn't have a clear plan, just a map, a gut feeling, and the weight of a name that had haunted me more than it ever helped. I filled a thermos with black coffee, tossed in a flashlight, my notebook, and the old map. The air in the house felt heavier now, like it knew I was about to peel back another layer of the past. As I stepped out, the morning light hit the roof lines of the neighboring houses. Birds chirped like nothing had changed, but something had, inside me. In the car, I glanced at my phone. 7 missed calls from Nora. 1 voicemail from Marjorie. I didn't need to listen to know the tone. The text said, "Stop chasing ghosts." I stared at it for a second, then hit delete. "Then let the ghosts chase me," I muttered. The engine turned over without protest for once. I pulled out of the driveway, watching the house shrink in the mirror. It looked like it was holding its breath. Traffic thinned out once I got beyond the suburbs. Billboards faded into telephone poles, gas stations turned to old shacks, and Houston disappeared in the rear view. I turned on the radio again, static, then a sudden burst of music. "Take Me Home, Country Roads." I smiled without meaning to. My grandfather used to hum that tune while whittling wood on the back porch. He once told me, "One day, you'll build something that lasts, Calla. Not just walls, meaning." Now I understood what he meant. It wasn't just about houses or renovations. It was about legacy, truth, maybe even redemption. The miles rolled by. My hands stayed steady on the wheel, but my chest tightened the further north I drove. I wasn't sure if it was dread or something deeper, like my past was dragging itself up from the dirt and demanding to be faced. It was late afternoon when I spotted a gas station on the left, more rust than building, with a Pepsi sign so faded it looked like a ghost of itself. I pulled in out of necessity. I wasn't sure when I'd see another. Inside, it smelled like motor oil and old newspapers. A single shelf of dusty snacks, a mini fridge humming under flickering lights. The man behind the counter looked about 70, with thick glasses and a beard that had lost its color years ago. I paid for gas and set my folded map on the counter while digging for change. He didn't speak right away, just looked down at the map. "You headed near Elkwood?" he asked, voice low. I nodded, cautious. "Why?" He leaned in slightly, eyes sharper than before. "That land's been locked up for years. Belonged to the Thorne family, until it didn't." I felt a jolt in my gut. I'm a Thorne. His face didn't change much, but something tightened in his jaw. He tapped the counter twice. "If you're one of them, you best turn around." I tried to play it off. "It's just an old property, nothing more." He shook his head. "That place doesn't forgive." He handed back my change, his hand brushing mine. It was ice cold. Whether from the fridge or something else, I didn't know. Back in the car, I sat with the engine idling. For a moment, I considered turning around, but I didn't. I couldn't. The sun dipped low as the roads narrowed. Asphalt gave way to gravel, then to cracked stone framed by tall oaks leaning in like old sentries. My tires crunched slowly forward until I reached a rusted gate flanked by half-collapsed stone walls. I parked and got out. The air smelled of moss and iron. Leaves rustled, not with wind, but with memory. Before me stood what was left of an estate, overgrown, forgotten, but not dead. Not quite. I stepped closer. My shoes sank slightly into the soft earth. I touched the metal gate. It groaned beneath my fingers. "Grandpa," I whispered, "what did you hide here?" A creak echoed from somewhere deep inside the house. Not loud, but deliberate, like a door being nudged open by someone who wasn't surprised to see me. He didn't look surprised to see me, only relieved. The last streaks of sunset clung to the tops of the trees as I stepped through the gate, its hinges groaning behind me like they hadn't been touched in years. The man at the door held a lantern, and the flame inside it danced in the breeze, casting his lined face in shifting shadows. He wore a faded button-down tucked neatly into slacks, far too clean for a place this forgotten. "You took long enough," he said, calm as if he'd just been expecting a neighbor. I blinked. "Do I know you?" He nodded slightly. "You knew my employer, or you will, if you're willing to hear the whole of it." His voice was rough but steady, like gravel smoothed over by time. There was no threat in it, but something weighty rested behind each word. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. My feet moved forward on their own. "I'm Eli Barrow," he said once we were inside. "Your grandfather's caretaker. Been here longer than most of the trees outside." The air in the estate was heavy, cedar, mildew, dust, and something else I couldn't name. My eyes adjusted slowly to the gloom. Cobwebs hung like lace in the corners. Every step we took echoed softly on the worn wooden floors. He didn't bother flipping on any lights. The lantern led the way, casting golden rings over what once had been grandeur. Chandeliers caked in dust, long hallways lined with covered portraits. He paused in front of one. A slip of fabric had fallen, just enough to reveal part of the image. My breath caught. It was my grandfather, unmistakable even in paint, standing beside a younger version of my father. Between them stood a little girl in a pale blue dress. She had my hair, my mouth, my stubborn chin. "That's you," Eli said quietly. He always said you were the only one with his eyes. I swallowed hard. He remembered me? He turned to face me, slower than before. "Every day, till the end." The ache in my chest surprised me. I'd buried that man in a tidy memory, locked away after my mother told me he passed quietly in his sleep when I was 7. No hospital, no funeral I was allowed to attend. Just a silence that lasted decades. Eli walked ahead, past the gallery and into a small study that still smelled faintly of pipe smoke and lemon oil. He set the lantern down on an old oak desk, then shuffled to a kettle sitting on a dusty side table. Without asking, he poured water into a chipped kettle and set it on a small gas burner. "I kept this room the way he liked it," Eli said, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for 2 cups. "Didn't feel right otherwise." He motioned for me to sit. The chair creaked beneath me, but it held. "I suppose there's no right way to say this," he began, lowering himself slowly into the chair across from mine. "But your grandfather didn't die the way they told you." The words hit like a slap in the cold. "What?" He nodded grimly. "It wasn't illness. It was betrayal." My mouth went dry. "By who?" He didn't blink. "By your parents, by the people who should have protected his name, his wishes." My heartbeat thudded in my ears. I gripped the sides of the chair. "They forged his will," Eli continued, "claimed he left it all to them, took everything, left this place to rot." "No," I whispered, more to myself than to him. Eli poured tea into the cups, his hands steadier now. He didn't look up. He knew they would come for his estate, so he made a plan, something they couldn't touch. He raised his gaze. "You." The silence stretched. "I was just a kid." He said that's when people show who they really are. He reached behind the desk and retrieved a box. Wooden, worn smooth by years of handling. It had a brass clasp that clicked open beneath his thumb. Inside was a smaller key, silver, ornate, nearly identical to the bent one I carried on my keychain. He lifted it carefully and set it between us. "And this," he said, pulling out a folded envelope sealed with a wax crest I recognized instantly. The family crest. "I was to give this to you when you found your way home," he added. My fingers shook as I broke the seal. The parchment was old, but the ink hadn't faded. "To my granddaughter, Calla," it began. "If you are reading this, it means truth has finally chosen courage." I didn't notice the tears until one splashed onto the paper. I wiped it with my sleeve and kept reading. He spoke of things I never knew. His plans for the land, for our name. How he tried to set things right before his time was cut short. He warned of lies and masks, especially the kind worn by those who pretend to love out of duty, not heart. One line stopped me cold. "The map leads not to wealth, but to truth. Only truth will set you free." I read it 3 times. Eli watched me the whole time, his hands resting on the table, steady now. "Why now?" I asked, barely able to find my voice. "Because your grandfather believed," Eli said gently, "that one day you'd stop apologizing for existing." I looked down at the 2 keys, one bent, one whole. One from a place that broke me, one from a man who wanted me to rise. I nodded slowly. "Then I guess it's time they see me exist." The lantern flickered. The wind outside howled faintly. Before dawn, I made my choice. I wasn't going back to Houston empty-handed. By the time I reached Houston, the sun had barely pushed above the skyline. The soft blue light of early morning crept across the quiet street as I turned the corner onto my block, still replaying Eli's words in my head. My hands were tight on the wheel. Every bump in the road rattled deeper than the tires. I pulled up in front of my house, the small, weary place that was supposed to be my reset button, my safe space. But something felt wrong the moment I cut the engine. The front door was cracked open, not wide, just enough. Enough to know it wasn't me who left it that way. I didn't rush, didn't call out. I stepped slowly onto the porch, pushing the door open with 2 fingers. It swung in with a low creak. My living room was in ruins. Drawers yanked out, cushions slashed. The small side table I used as a desk had been flipped, papers scattered and torn. Even the wooden floorboards near the fireplace had been pried up in chunks, splinters strewn like debris after a storm. "No," I whispered, a breath more than a sound. I ran to the hallway wall, the one behind the framed print where I'd taped the envelope with the map. The tape was there. The envelope was not. My heart thudded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I fumbled for my phone and called Eli. He picked up on the first ring. "They were here," I said, my voice barely held together. "The map's gone." A pause. Then, "Calla, listen to me. That map, it wasn't about money. It was about proof. They want to erase what your grandfather left behind." I sat on the floor, too lightheaded to stand. My purse lay beside me. I reached inside and pulled out the bent silver key. Still there, still cool in my hand. "They know now," Eli said gently. "They won't stop, not until they've taken everything." I looked around, what used to be mine, now violated. My gaze landed on a broken picture frame. The photo inside was of me and my dad, taken years ago. A rare moment when he looked proud of me. The glass had split across our faces like a wound. I clenched my jaw. "Then they'll find out I don't scare that easily." There was a knock at the door. I froze. The knock came again, sharp, deliberate. Peering through the front curtain, I saw it. A sleek black car. My mother's. I opened the door but didn't step aside. She pushed past me anyway, like she'd always owned the place. She gave the room a sweeping glance, unimpressed. "So this is where you live. No wonder you never invited anyone." I didn't answer. She turned slowly, her lips pressed tight. "Where is it?" "Where's what?" I asked, already knowing. "Don't play games, Calla. You were seen at Elkwood." I said nothing. "You're not just trespassing on family land. You're digging where you don't belong." And there it was. "You sent them," I said flatly. "You sent someone to break in." She didn't even flinch. "I did what I had to. You weren't supposed to know about that house, much less go sniffing around with maps and keys like some child in a fairy tale." The bile in my throat burned. "He was my grandfather. You lied to me my whole life." "You think you're the only one who lost him?" she snapped. "He wasn't who you think he was. He was old, tired, confused." "Then why forge his will?" That stopped her. The front door opened again. Lucan, calm as ever, tie loosened like he'd just come from a brunch meeting. "Sis," he said, holding his hands up. "Let's not do this. We're just here because we're concerned." "Concerned?" I nearly laughed. "Then why did your men tear my house apart?" Lucan's mouth stayed shut. He looked to our mother. She gave him one of those looks, the kind that says, "Let me handle this." She stepped closer. "You don't understand the weight of what you've walked into. That land was buried for a reason. So were its secrets." I stood straighter. "Then maybe they shouldn't have been lies." "You're not thinking clearly," Lucan cut in. "You've always had this idealistic streak. That's dangerous now." I looked at both of them. I saw it. Fear, hidden behind arrogance. They weren't angry I'd found something. They were scared I'd keep looking. "I'm not part of your business," I said. "You're part of this family," Marjorie spat. "Not the kind you run." I stepped past her, walked to the door and opened it. Cold morning air drifted in. Get out! Marjorie didn't move at first, but Lucan touched her elbow. She didn't look at me as she walked past. He lingered, his eyes full of something that almost looked like pity. He said nothing, just followed her out. The moment the door clicked shut, I locked it. Top and bottom. Only then did I see it. A single sheet of paper on my kitchen table, laid out neatly. No envelope, just handwriting, my father's. Meet me alone. Midnight, the dock at Willow Creek. I picked it up. The faintest trace of my grandfather's cologne clung to the page. My chest tightened. I whispered into the silence, "Dad, what have you done?" That night, I drove to Willow Creek, not knowing if I was meeting my father or my fate. The mist was thicker than I expected. It hung low across the dock like it was guarding something, or someone. My headlights pierced through it in long beams, and the gravel crackled under my tires as I rolled into the lot at Willow Creek. I killed the engine and sat still for a moment. My hand brushed against the silver key in my coat pocket, and for a second I almost turned back. But something told me the past wouldn't let me go that easy. Not until I looked it in the face. When I stepped out of the car, the air hit me cold and damp. A street lamp flickered a few yards away, casting a yellow cone of light onto the wooden dock. That's where I saw him. A figure leaning against the railing. Thin, worn down, but familiar in that way only blood can be. "You came," he said. His voice was softer than I remembered. Older, hollowed out by time or guilt. Maybe both. I didn't move. "You left a note. That's not the same as showing up for 20 years. He shifted, as if those years weighed heavy on his spine. "Fair." We stood in silence. The wood creaked under my feet as I walked toward him. "Why now?" I asked. He took a long breath, the kind that made his shoulders rise like he was still deciding whether or not to speak. "Your grandfather trusted me, and I failed him." I stayed quiet, let him dig his own grave with words. He was sick, we knew that, but the will, the estate, that wasn't supposed to be how it ended. He looked out at the water. "Your mother, she put papers in front of me, told me they were just for medical decisions. Routine. I didn't read them, I just signed." I didn't say anything. "She used my signature to forge everything," he continued. "Bank accounts, property deeds. The real will disappeared. So did his final letter to you." I clenched my fists. "You let her bury him as a thief. You stood by while she stole everything he wanted to leave behind." His voice cracked, thin as the fog. "You think I didn't try? I spoke up, and every time she reminded me what I'd lose. You, the family, my name." He looked at me then. "I was a coward, Calla, but I wasn't blind." There was no good response to that. No forgiveness I was ready to hand over. But I saw it. The shame in his eyes. It didn't undo the betrayal, but it made it real. He reached into his coat and pulled out something wrapped in a plastic bag, a small leather-bound notebook, water-stained at the edges. "This was your grandfather's lawyer's," he said, handing it to me. "It's old, but it lists every transaction made before she touched the accounts. Bank logs, witnesses, even a note about the safe deposit box where he kept the original will." I flipped through it. Handwritten dates, initials, transfer numbers. "Why are you giving me this now?" He looked down at his hands, pale and thin. "Because I'm dying, Calla." The words landed like stone. He didn't wait for a reaction. I wanted at least one person to know I wasn't always the man she turned me into. I stared at the ledger. The weight of it felt bigger than the paper it held. "She's going to come after me for this," I said quietly. "I know," he replied. "She already suspects. She's watching everything. If she finds out I gave you that, she won't stop with threats." I slid the book into my coat. "Then maybe it's time someone ended her story." That made him smile. Small and tired, but real. You really are your grandfather's girl. He turned to leave, his shoulders hunched beneath the coat. As he walked away, he didn't say goodbye. The fog swallowed him by the time he reached the end of the dock. I stood still, listening to the water lapping against the posts, the creaking wood beneath my feet, the rustling of reeds in the dark. And then I felt it, that prickle on the back of my neck. Someone else was there. Across the dock, near a boathouse, I saw it. A faint beam of light. A silhouette. Watching. My breath caught. The figure turned and vanished into the mist. My phone buzzed. One new text. Unknown number. You should have stayed gone. I stared at it. Not surprised. Not anymore. She knows, I whispered to the dark. And I knew then. The next move was mine. The figure watching me from across the dock had vanished into the fog like smoke pulled back into the bottle. But the text stayed on my screen, glowing cold and threatening in the dark. You should have stayed gone. I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in my car for hours, gripping the ledger tighter than I needed to. Like if I blinked, it had vanished too. By the time the sky shifted from black to that pale gray of early morning, I'd made it home. The second I stepped inside, my phone rang. Unknown number again. This time, I answered. Ms. Blythe? A man's voice said, calm, official. This is Officer Redding with Harris County PD. I'm calling regarding your father. Something in me braced. What about him? I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. There was a car found early this morning off Willow Creek Road. Single vehicle accident. We believe it was your father. No. I didn't mean to say it out loud, but it came out anyway. Flat, final. We'll need someone to confirm identity, he continued, his voice dipping into that rehearsed tone officers use when grief is expected. I hung up without saying anything else and ran straight to the bedroom. Dropped to my knees and keyed open the lockbox under the bed. It clicked open. I stared. The notebook inside looked just like the one my father handed me the night before. Same worn leather, same size, same water damage. But when I opened it, the pages were blank. Every last one. I stayed frozen there for a full minute before slamming it shut. They'd been here, not just watching me, not just threatening. They had gotten inside, into my home, into my safe. And they'd taken everything. I didn't even lock the door behind me as I left. The drive to Elkwood was a blur of red lights and knuckles turning white around the steering wheel. Eli opened his door before I even knocked. You look like you've seen the end of the world. They took it, I said, holding out the fake. The ledger's gone. This is just a prop now. He didn't even look surprised, just sighed, deep and heavy. Then she knows you've got enough to hurt her. She killed him, I whispered, or had someone do it. She's been cleaning house since the day you left for college, he said. I warned him. I begged him to stay away from her. I looked at him, suddenly frantic. There has to be something else, some other way to prove what she did. He paused, thinking. There might be one man who can help. Jonas Hale. He used to be a detective. Your grandfather trusted him with things he didn't trust lawyers with. Can I trust him? If he's still breathing, Eli said, he'll tell you what the file says, not what your mother wants it to say. I didn't stop to argue. I just got back in my car and drove. Jonas Hale lived in a modest one-story outside the city. The yard was well kept, but not showy. When he opened the EA's door, I saw the same kind of suspicion in his eyes that I felt in my gut. You've got your grandfather's eyes, he said. Means trouble just walked onto my porch. I explained everything, as fast and as clearly as I could. The fake will, the stolen estate, the ledger that vanished. He didn't take notes. He didn't ask for proof. Just walked into the back room and came out with a file folder older than I was. Your dad came to me once, he said, flipping it open. Back in '99. Said something was off. Said his wife was moving money around that wasn't hers to move. I stepped closer. He filed a report? Briefly, then pulled it 3 days later. Said it was a misunderstanding. Probably because she made sure he misunderstood his role in this family. He handed me the folder. Inside, a copy of the original report, handwritten notes, even a list of witness names crossed out in red ink. You're not crazy, he said, but you are up against someone who's been doing this longer than you've been breathing. On the way back, my phone lit up with a dozen new messages. I glanced at the screen, and my stomach dropped. Thorne IRS claims $900 stolen. Family responds, Calla Blythe. Delusional or dangerous. Breaking, estranged daughter, accused of forgery, mental instability. I pulled over, heart pounding. My photo stared back at me from the screen, taken at Elkwood, grainy but damning. They're turning me into a headline, I muttered. A scandal. I hit speed dial. Lucan picked up on the second ring. You saw it? I asked. He sighed. Yeah, I saw it. You told them, didn't you? I didn't leak anything, Calla. But you need to stop. You're making all of us look unhinged. Just let it go. The line went dead. By the time I got home, the sun had dipped low enough to paint everything gold, but it didn't feel warm. I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I didn't drink. Across from me sat the empty safe, the cracked photo of my dad and me on the wall, headlines flashing on my laptop screen like a silent chorus. I heard my grandfather's voice in the back of my head. The map doesn't lead to wealth, Calla. It leads to truth. Only truth sets you free. I wiped my eyes, clicked open my laptop camera, and hit record. My name is Calla Blythe, I said, voice low but steady. And you've been hearing lies. I'm going to tell you the real story, the one they've tried to bury. I took a breath. If they want a show, fine, but this time I'm writing the script. The sky was still gray when I woke, the air in my house cold with that unmistakable stillness before something breaks. My phone lit up on the table. One name, Mom. For a second, I stared at it. The screen glowed like a dare. Then I answered, I hope you got your little performance out of your system, she said, calm and venomous. You always hated when I spoke up, but I guess now the world's listening, you have a problem with it. You've embarrassed me for the last time, Calla. Take down the video, now, or you'll regret ever picking up that camera. You taught me how to fight. You just never thought I'd use it against you. There was a long pause. You don't know who you're dealing with. Oh, but I do. The call ended, but her voice lingered like smoke in the air. I didn't shower, didn't eat. Just sat at the kitchen table, staring at the laptop screen like it was a loaded weapon. I refreshed my page. The views were climbing fast, thousands, then tens of thousands. The comments were pouring in, some supportive, some vicious. 2 hours later, the real show began. Every station in Houston aired it. Marjorie Thorne at a podium, draped in elegance, not a hair out of place. She looked every bit the grieving matriarch, voice smooth, expression practiced. My daughter is troubled. She's struggled with reality since childhood. This isn't the first time she's made up stories to get attention, and sadly, we believe she may be suffering a breakdown. Behind her, Lucan stood stiff, jaw tight, hands clasped, eyes on the ground. She has no evidence, she continued, no credibility. We love her, but we cannot let lies destroy this family. I stood frozen in my living room, watching my own mother accuse me of being insane, watching her tear me apart in front of the entire city. My hands trembled, my throat burned. She's turning them all against me, I said aloud to no one. That's when my phone buzzed again. "Still have the file from your father's safe?" Jonas asked, his voice low. "Yes, but I've got something better." I pulled open the audio app on my laptop. Hit play. Marjorie's voice filled the room, cold and clear. "If you ever talk about that will again, I'll have you declared unfit. I built this family, and I'll bury anyone who threatens it." Jonas whistled through his teeth. "Well now, that changes everything." "I'm not dropping this," I said. "Not after this morning." "Then don't," he said. "But do it where it counts." The courthouse steps were packed by late afternoon. Reporters swarmed like flies around Marjorie as she exited the building in another pristine suit, flanked by PR people and Lucan. I pushed through the crowd, held my phone up high. "Mom!" She turned. I tapped the screen and let it play. Her voice, recorded days ago, cut through the noise. "If you ever talk about that, will again?" Gasps rippled across the crowd. Cameras swung toward her. Microphones angled my way. Marjorie froze, lips parting. "She said I was unstable," I said calmly. "She said I had no proof. So here it is. Her words. Her threat." The flashbulbs exploded. Reporters shouted over each other. Lucan didn't move. He looked like a man trying not to throw up. Marjorie lunged toward a microphone. "That recording is fake. She edited it." I spoke louder. "You wanted a stage, Mom. Here it is. You don't get to hide behind grief and tailored suits anymore." More gasps, more photos, and then silence. Marjorie shoved past the press and disappeared into a waiting car. Lucan stood for a moment longer before walking off slowly, not even looking at me. I lowered my phone. My hands were shaking, but I felt tall. For once. "For the first time," I whispered, "I don't feel small anymore." The courthouse bell struck noon. It echoed across the square like the closing note to a song I'd waited my whole life to sing. But peace doesn't last in this family. Not even an hour after the press began to scatter, my phone buzzed again. Jonas. His voice was strained. "Calla, you need to sit down." "What is it?" "I just got the full report from a source down at the coroner's office. Your father's accident. It wasn't one." The ground shifted under me. "What are you saying?" He hesitated. "I'm saying someone made sure Elliot Thorne wouldn't talk." There was a long stretch of silence after Jonas said those words. I stood in the middle of my living room, phone still to my ear, the world blurring at the edges. "His brakes were cut," Jonas repeated, softer this time. "Shop confirmed it. The mechanic said someone tampered with the lines sometime late that night. He wouldn't have had a chance." I sat down slowly, the chair creaking beneath me. "You have proof?" "We've got the report. Fingerprints, residue. Enough to bring her in, Calla. This could bury her." I didn't respond right away. My fingers were wrapped tight around the phone, knuckles pale. Outside, the sun was slipping behind the trees, casting long shadows across the floorboards. Jonas asked quietly, "Do you want to go through with it?" I didn't have an answer yet. Not one I could say out loud. An hour later, I found myself gripping the steering wheel, driving through the outskirts of Houston. Jonas had given me the address to an old law office, one that used to belong to my grandfather's attorney before he retired, or maybe ran. The place was boarded up, but not locked. I pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside. Dust hung in the air like smoke. The scent was old paper, mildew, and something else. Memory, maybe. I made my way past the empty filing cabinets, and there it was. A single envelope, resting right in the center of the desk. My name was on it. To my granddaughter, if she ever finds her way home. The paper trembled in my hands as I opened it. Inside were two things: a folded letter and a legal document. The letter came first. My grandfather's handwriting was careful, looping. The kind of penmanship you don't see much anymore. Calla, if this found you, it means you kept digging. Money is the easiest thing in the world to forge. Character is not. I've seen what greed does. If you're reading this, then you have too. My name, this family's name. It only means something if someone out there is still willing to clean the mud off it. I never wanted you to carry this burden. But I trust you to do the right thing, even if it means walking away. Granddad. I read it twice, then held it against my chest, letting the weight of it settle over me like a blanket, both warm and heavy. The document was a will, not a financial one. No estates, no bank accounts, no stocks or property. Just a designation. I was to be the executor of truth. No one else. I stood there a long while in that empty office. It felt less like a discovery and more like a goodbye. Later that night, on the drive home, the radio was a low murmur. Static, and then a reporter's voice. Marjorie Thorne indicted today on multiple counts, including fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The words came clean and sharp, like a knife slicing through silk. Her son, Lucan Thorne, is said to be cooperating with authorities. I turned the volume down. My fingers loosened from the steer wheel. So that was it. No satisfaction, no victory lap. Just silence in the cabin and a dull ache under my ribs. I pulled into my driveway, headlights cutting through the dusk. The porch light blinked once and held steady. Inside, I didn't bother turning on more lights. I just sat at the table, staring at nothing. An hour passed before there was a knock at the door. Jonas stepped inside quietly. He looked tired, older than he did even a week ago. In his hand was an envelope. "This is it," he said. "It's everything. We could go after her for the murder, Calla. You'd win." I looked at the envelope but didn't take it. "I'm tired, Jonas," I said, "and I don't want to spend the rest of my life chasing her shadow." "She took your father," he said gently. "And maybe more." "She took 20 years from me," I replied. "But I'm not giving her one more." Jonas studied me for a moment, then gave a small nod. "Your grandfather would have been proud." I smiled. Not big, but real. "I think I'm finally proud too." He left without another word. The house was quiet again, still. I made tea, painted the living room wall halfway before the brush slipped from my hand. I laughed softly. Not from joy, but from the simple strangeness of having space to breathe. In the corner of the mantel, the silver key gleamed under the soft lamplight. I'd cleaned it, polished it. It was the only thing that looked new in that house. I picked it up, turned it over in my palm. Then I looked around, the cracked walls, the uneven floor, the faint sound of the old pipes humming. And I whispered, this was never about money. It was about finding the place where I could finally breathe. On the shelf beside the key was a framed photo I dug up from the attic. Me, no more than 7, sitting under a big oak tree, my grandfather beside me, both of us grinning like the world hadn't yet turned ugly. I smiled back at the photo. The wind outside shifted, rustling the trees. Somewhere far off, a dog barked once, and I knew it was over. They called it an inheritance. I call it freedom. Also,